Today's top story. Davante Adams has officially requested a trade from the Raiders. And he has a wish list. We're going to dive into those, plus other potential landing spots for the star wide receiver. We also have a Christian McCaffrey update. We have a benching in New England. And two big names have returned to the practice field. All that, plus other top stories, the Week 5 injuries you need to know, stats, trends, players to watch, and much more today on Breaking Fantasy Football. Welcome into Breaking Fantasy Football, part of the Yards Per Fantasy podcast and YouTube network. I'm Alex Johnson. And like I said at the top, we are starting with Davante Adams. He has officially requested a trade from the Raiders. And reportedly, he has two teams in mind. He wants to go to the Jets. And if he can't go to the Jets, he'd like to go to the Saints. Now, looking at the Jets, we're going to dive into multiple of these landing spots. I got a few in mind as well. So the Jets, they do have the cap space to make it happen. So obviously, Davante Adams has this big contract. Whoever trades for him is going to have to be able to take on that contract. Now, there are reports, rumblings that maybe the Raiders could be willing to keep paying a little bit of that deal, which would enhance what they can get back in return. They want a second-round pick. Maybe in order to be able to get that second-round pick, they're willing to pay some of his salary. So that makes it a little bit easier for some of these teams to take him on as far as cap space goes. But doesn't matter for the Jets, they do have the space. They also have additional third and sixth round picks in the 2025 draft, which is only going to help give them the ammunition to go and get a star wide receiver like Davante Adams. Now, how does Davante Adams fit in the mix with Garrett Wilson, who's already not getting targeted the way we want him to be for fantasy football purposes? I don't know, but we know Davante Adams from day one comes in and becomes the alpha in that passing game. He's going to be the guy that Aaron Rodgers is looking to. Now, I think that would be more likely to be instead of, a Mike Williams or Allen Lazard rather than Garrett Wilson, but it still really crushes anybody who is drafting Garrett Wilson in the first round of drafts this year, because we were banking on him being the alpha, being a guy who's going to command a heavy target share in an Aaron Rodgers offense. Davante Adams comes in and takes that away immediately from Garrett Wilson. It's already not happening anyway. It's not happening anyway, but we're still holding out hope that it could. Davante Adams crushes that hope if he lands with the Jets. I do believe that is the most likely spot for Davante Adams. They definitely need to add some pass catchers, some elements to that offense. Obviously, he has the pass with Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers is going to campaign for him. I know he's campaigning right now in the front office, trying to get them to trade for Davante Adams. And Adams wants to go there. So he's also mentioned the Saints as a possible landing spot. Obviously, he has the history with Derek Carr. They played together at Fresno State. They played together briefly with the Raiders. It didn't go very well, but they played together with the Raiders. But they also have Chris Olave, who is starting to really come on over the last few weeks. And they have Rashid Shaheed, who's having a breakout season, which is fantastic. Davante Adams comes in and crushes both of them. He crushes both of them. I think Olave would still be okay, but rather than producing as like the high-end wide receiver 2 that he's been, he might be more in that high-end wide receiver 3 range from a fantasy perspective. Shaheed would probably be more back to the boom-bust guy that he was last year, where you really are banking on that long touchdown. You're not going to get the 20+% target shares that he has produced every single week so far this season. Now, there are other possible landing spots that are not on Davante Adams' wish list. He has mentioned that he'd be okay. He'd be open to other teams. So who could those other teams be? I want you to tell me in the comments who you would like to see Davante Adams play for, especially if it's not the Jets or the Saints? Can you give me somebody else who you think Davante Adams would play for, where you would like to see him? I got a few potential options. Maybe the Bills. The Bills could be very motivated to maybe just block the Jets from getting him. Obviously, the Jets are their number one competition in the AFC East right now. What's up, D-Wave? What's up? Good morning, bro. Who do you think Davante Adams is going to go play for this year? Tell me. Let me know in the comments. But anyway, the Bills, they could be motivated to block the Jets from going to get him. But they could also use him themselves, right? They really have no true number one wide receiver with Stephon Diggs out of there. And while they're still operating at a high level because they got Josh Allen, I think by the end of the year, that could be a little bit more of a conversation piece where maybe that we've seen it with the Bills in the past. The offense kind of stalls out second half of the year. Could that happen? Davante Adams could come in and possibly prevent that from happening. They do have a little bit of salary cap concerns, though, so it would be a situation where they're going to need the Raiders to take on some of that salary from Davante Adams, which it sounds like they're open to doing, like we said. Other landing spots, maybe the Steelers. The Steelers, they're 3-1. They're leading the AFC North right now. So they're clearly going to try to contend. I don't think they're realistic contenders by any means, but they might think they are. And if you look at their wide receiver core, it's George Pickens and nobody, right? Nobody. Roman Wilson, he's been hurt. He's not happening. Calvin Austin is second on the team, I believe, as far as the wide receivers go in targets and yards. I mean, we really want Calvin Austin as your wide receiver too there. Now, again, they're going to have to be creative to fit Davante Adams in as far as salary cap goes, but they were in on Brandon Ayuk, so obviously they believe they can find a way to make a deal like that happen, and they know that they need a wide receiver. They were in on Ayuk. Why wouldn't they be in on Davante Adams? Chiefs are probably the most talked about, other than the Jets and the Saints, the most talked about possible landing spot for Davante Adams. However, I just don't know. These teams are funny, man. These teams are funny about trading star players within the division, right? So the Raiders really going to trade Davante Adams to the best team in their division, the team that already dominates every year anyway. They're just going to give them Davante Adams. I really think they're going to be pretty stubborn about that. Now, do I think that they should be stubborn about it? I think they should be open to it. Just do what is best for your team. Don't worry about the Chiefs. You are years away from being able to compete with the Chiefs on any level. By the time you're ready to compete with the Chiefs, Davante Adams is going to be retired. So take that second round pick from the Chiefs and move on. Be okay with it. But these front offices, man, they just don't do it. I mean, we saw in the summer, we saw the Commanders trade Jahan Dotson within the division to the Eagles, but they only traded him because he stinks. If it was Terry McLaurin, they're not trading him to the Eagles. No way in hell they would do that. But we got this terrible wide receiver who we know he stinks. We know he's no threat to do anything. So why don't we just give him to the Eagles? That's fine. This is not that case. But the Chiefs clearly need a wide receiver. We're going to get into that a little bit more in a few minutes on possible other options for them to go trade for. Because we're looking at that wide receiver core. Rashee Rice out, likely for the season. We'll probably find more out about that next week. Marquise Brown's on IR. He's not back until the playoffs at the very, very earliest. I would predict he probably doesn't play at all in 2024. And after that, it's Xavier Worthy, who's a rookie, kind of boom bust. Hasn't put it all together yet, but I like him. And then after that, it's a big, big drop off. It's Justin Watson. It's Sky Moore, who never happened. It's Mecole Hardman. It's ugly. So the Chiefs definitely need to trade for some wide receivers, but like I said, we'll get into that a little bit deeper in a few minutes. Other potential landing spots, I got two more for Davante Adams. The Commanders, maybe they've come up in conversation. They're 3-1. They're kind of rolling. They're feeling good. It's confirmed that their quarterback that they drafted, Jaden Daniels, he's good. Confirmed good. They have nothing after Terry McLaurin. I mean, it's Luke McCaffrey. He's a nice slot guy, but he's not a major target commander. Commander. And they do have the cap flexibility to make it happen. And like with the Steelers, they were reportedly in on Brandon Ayuk, not to the degree that the Steelers were necessarily, but they were at least slightly interested. I think maybe that was a little bit more about the Arizona State connection with Brandon Ayuk and Jaden Daniels than it really was with the Commanders trying to get a wide receiver. But now that the Commanders are good, they're competing, they might have a little bit of a different attitude. Maybe we can go and get a guy like Davante Adams, and it makes sense for us this year. Last spot that has come up in several conversations about Davante Adams landing spots, and that is the Ravens. The Ravens are sneaky. The Ravens are an interesting one. They do have some salary cap concerns, but teams find a way to make it work. They just did extend Rashad Bateman. I don't know if that would deter them from going and getting a guy like Davante Adams. I doubt it. But that would be fun. I mean, that would be a really, really fun offense. Lamar, Davante Adams, Zay Flowers. I mean, they definitely could use that extra weapon because Mark Andrews isn't happening. Mark Andrews is just a big dust ball. And Isaiah Likely was a 1 week wonder, apparently. So they could use definitely a big-time playmaker on the outside. All right, let's move on to our other top stories today. We got Nick Chubb returning to practice this week. They opened up the practice window. If you look back at last year, obviously we know what happened to his knee. He had procedures to repair his medial capsule, his meniscus, and his MCL in September. And then they had to wait a couple of months till November to repair the ACL. So 2 major surgeries for Nick Chubb last season. He said it felt like a dream being back on the practice field this week. He did say he's unsure of when he's going to actually get into a game, but they do have 21 days to activate him, so it's going to happen within a few weeks. We're going to get Nick Chubb back. Now, I don't expect we're going to get the Nick Chubb that we're used to seeing. You know, the workload or the explosiveness, the lateral agility that he brings. I don't think we're going to get the same version of Nick Chubb. I think Jerome Ford is still going to be heavily involved in that backfield. It could be more of a 50-50 split, especially early on. But that offense definitely needs somebody like Nick Chubb to come in and do something. Like wave a magic wand in front of Deshaun Watson and make him good again. I don't know. I don't know if he has that powers, but he has the power to heal from that incredible knee injury. So maybe he can bippity boppity boo. Deshaun Watson, you're good again. Congratulations. I don't know. But we also had TJ Hockenson return. They opened up the practice window on TJ Hockenson. He was back at practice on Friday on the field. He had his ACL and MCL torn in December last year. I believe they waited a little while for the swelling and stuff to go down to actually repair it in January, end of January, I believe. He also, just like Nick Chubb, has 21 days to return to the 53-man roster. Now, Ian Rappaport said that he expects that the Vikings are very likely to give him the full 3 weeks before activating him. So we probably won't see TJ Hockenson until about week 8. Which is okay, which is about what we were expecting anyway. But we were not expecting him to come back to a really good Vikings team, really good Vikings offense with a really good Sam Darnold at quarterback. That was not what we were expecting. So that's great news. If you drafted TJ Hockenson, you got him on your IR spot, he might be able to help you down the stretch in the fantasy playoffs. I think it'll take a few weeks to kind of get ramped up, but Sam Darnold, if he keeps rolling like this, TJ Hockenson is going to be valuable for you in fantasy football last 6 weeks or so. And then we have Christian McCaffrey. We talked about Christian McCaffrey on last week's Breaking Fantasy Football show. where he went to Germany to see a specialist for his Achilles tendonitis. He came back last week, end of the week. He returned from Germany. We saw him on the sidelines of the game. And then, I believe it was on Monday, Kyle Shanahan revealed that the Achilles tendonitis was not just happening in one leg, it was happening in both legs. Oh, great, right? Fuck, what the hell? Both legs he's dealing with this? The quote from Kyle Shanahan, he said, I think it started in one, you overcompensate, and it went to the other. But mainly one of them has just been bothering him, but he's had it in both. So this is not a good situation for Christian McCaffrey. He's got that tendonitis in both legs right now. This is one of these injuries that, you know, you can feel like you're getting back. You can feel like you're almost 100%, and then boom, it just pops right back up again, and you're back to square one. So that's really, really, really concerning for Christian McCaffrey. He is eligible to return in Week 6 against the Seahawks. I don't expect that to happen. And Ian Rappaport suggested this week, it was kind of a cryptic tweet from Ian Rappaport. You could have taken a couple of different ways, but he said Christian McCaffrey could be back by, quote, at least early November. So the way he phrased it, at least early November, does that mean like early November, like the latest, or the earliest? I don't know. But this is really concerning for Christian McCaffrey. I talked about on my trades video this week. I'm going out and I'm trying to trade for Jordan Mason because I expect we're going to get from here on out, rest of the season, we're going to see more starts from Jordan Mason in San Francisco than we are from Christian McCaffrey. This is really concerning for me, for McCaffrey. All right, moving on to our next top story, and that's Rashee Rice to IR. We all know the injury. We don't have to go through the injury too much. We know what's happening. We still don't have a final word on what the actual injury is. We know it's a knee injury, and we know it's bad. And it sounds like there's a lot of swelling going on right now. And it might be so much swelling that they can't get a clear look on the MRI to know for sure, to confirm that the ACL is torn. And that's bad news. However, maybe we're going to get good news. I don't know. Maybe we get good news that, hey, maybe it's not quite as bad as we originally thought. Maybe he's out 6 weeks or so, and maybe he comes back and actually plays in 2024. I think that's highly unlikely. I don't expect that to happen, but we can keep the light on, hold out hope a little bit for Rashee Rice. But what I want to talk about is, could the Chiefs trade for a wide receiver? We've already talked about that with Davante Adams. Could they go get Davante Adams? We already talked about that. But there are some other possible options. And let me know in the comments, who would you like the Chiefs to go out and trade for? What wide receiver would be on your wish list? So I've heard talk about Deontay Johnson, which makes a lot of sense. He's balling right now in Carolina with Andy Dalton, but that's still a very clear rebuild team. Andy Dalton, maybe the savior for the short term, but he's certainly not the savior for the long term. Bryce Young is dead. It's not happening. They don't have use long term for an aging wide receiver. Maybe they just they get some draft pick capital back in return for Deontay Johnson and kind of just try to rebuild this team. Let Xavier Legette be the alpha in that passing game and see what you have with Legette. See what you have with Jonathan Mingo. I don't know. Would make sense to move on from Deontay Johnson. He would be an unbelievable fit in Kansas City. I think he would slide right in to a pretty similar role to what we were seeing from Rashee Rice. They have somewhat similar skill sets as far as like the areas that they win. Now, obviously, Deontay Johnson's done it for a lot longer, and I just think it would be a great fit there in Kansas City. That would be kind of an unstoppable situation. We have a quarterback like Mahomes with an elite separator like Deontay Johnson. That would be a lot of fun. What about Christian Kirk? I've also heard Christian Kirk talked about. The Jaguars are 0-4. Trevor Lawrence is the most overrated quarterback in the NFL. Could they move on from Christian Kirk? He got that big contract a couple years ago. He might be a little bit overpaid at this point. Maybe they want to get out from that, get some draft capital moving forward. They've got Brian Thomas Jr., who is emerging. maybe we want to open up and expand the role for Brian Thomas Jr. That would help. That would be helped by trading a guy like Christian Kirk, make Thomas the number one. It makes sense, right? It makes sense. And again, it would make sense for the Chiefs, somebody who can operate at a high level in the middle of the field, just like what Rashee Rice was doing. Obviously, they're different players, different styles, but they can win in similar areas. Amari Cooper, he's been rumored to be on the block, pretty much going back to the summer, right? In August, he was involved in when the Browns were pursuing Brandon Ayuk. It was kind of thrown out there that maybe Amari Cooper could be heading from Cleveland to San Francisco as part of a Brandon Ayuk deal. Obviously, that didn't happen, but it's kind of out there that Amari Cooper is on the trade block. We'll kind of see what happens with that. Could he go to Kansas City? Now, he would definitely be a different type of player, different type of role than what Rashee Rice was given, but I think they could make it work. I think they could figure it out. They'll make it work. Amari Cooper's still playing at a high level. He'd be a lot of fun there in Kansas City. And that would be perfect. I mean, you got Xavier Worthy on one side as the speed demon. You got Amari Cooper, as the route technician on the other side. And then you got Travis Kelce work in the middle of the field. I think that would be a nice combination. So we'll see if they make that move. Last name I want to throw out there, maybe DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, clearly Will Levis ain't it, right? He's not the guy. And DeAndre Hopkins is 32 years old, I believe. What's the point of hanging on to him? If this is a lost season for the Titans, what's the point? Get something back in return. So maybe we see DeAndre Hopkins dealt to maybe the Chiefs. Anyway, let me know in the comments who you think would be a great trade target at wide receiver for the Chiefs. Let me know if you think any of these guys that I mentioned are good option for them. Last top story we got today is Ramondre Stevenson will not start against the Dolphins tomorrow. Gerard Mayo said this week, he said, quote, he had a conversation with Ramondre and he won't start, but he will play. So Ramondre Stevenson has fumbled, I believe, in every game. He's had fumble issues this year so far. So this means that it's kind of like a little punishment right here for Ramondre. He's not going to start. He is going to play. Antonio Gibson's going to get the start. Now, we've seen plenty of times where we hear, oh, this guy's going to start today, but he starts and he plays like 6 snaps. It could be one of these situations because I still believe the Patriots, they do believe in Ramondre. They do trust him. I think this is kind of a fluky thing for him with these fumble issues. But Antonio Gibson's been playing pretty decent. He's an explosive runner. I don't think this is that big of a deal. I think we knock him down the rankings a little bit. But I think we'll still play Ramondre Stevenson. I'm still not quite as high on him as where maybe we would have been entering this week. I think we got to knock him down, like I said, but I think he's still usable. If you have other good options, go for that. But I think he's still usable. I think we can still trust Ramondre to have at least a decent role, similar to what we've seen the last couple of weeks in New England. All right, let's move on to the injury report. We got a lot of injuries as usual. We'll start with the Cardinals. We got Trey McBride. He's been cleared to return from a concussion. He is going to play. Khalil Shakir, he's got an ankle injury. He didn't practice at all this week. He is out. We talked about DeAndre Johnson as a possible trade target for the Chiefs. He's got an ankle injury. He was limited on Friday, but he's good to go. He's going to play. For the Bears, Cole Kmet, knee injury. He was limited on Wednesday, but he practiced in full on Thursday and Friday. He's going to play. David Njoku, ankle injury. He hasn't played since, I believe, week 1. He's questionable. He was limited on Friday. Sounds like kind of a game time decision type of thing. I would project maybe we get one more week without David Njoku before he returns. He's officially questionable. Pierre Strong is questionable. He was limited on Friday. Jerry Jeudy has a knee injury. He practiced on Friday, but he is going to play. Brandon Ayuk, knee injury, out. maybe that opens up more possibilities, more opportunities for Jalen Tolbert in that offense, who's played, fairly well so far at the beginning of the season. He's going to be the clear wide receiver 2 there this week with Cooks out. Rico Dowdle has a wrist injury, but he practiced in full all week. He's going to play. No worries there. Look at the Packers. We got Jordan Love has that knee injury. He was still limited on Wednesday, but he was back to full practice, which I believe was the first full practice that he's had because he was limited all week last week. This is the first full practice that Jordan Love has had since going into week 1. He was full on Thursday and Friday. Obviously, we know he is going to play. However, he's going to be without a couple of his starting wide receivers. The first is Christian Watson. He's got that ankle injury that we saw last week. Doesn't sound like it's going to be quite as bad as it originally seemed to be. This looked like it could have been like a 6 to 8 week type of deal. Doesn't sound like it's as bad. They did not put him on IR. So that tells me that they expect he's going to be back within the next 4 weeks. That's great news. But he is listed as doubtful for week 5, as is Romeo Doubs. Now, Romeo Doubs is listed as it being a personal issue, the reason that he's out, or doubtful, likely to be out. However, it came out this morning from SI.com, Bill Huber. He is reporting that Romeo Doubs, the personal issue is because Romeo Doubs is upset with the opportunities that he is getting in the passing game. He doesn't like his role right now. He doesn't like his role. Like, this dude is running essentially all the routes. He's on the field a ton. Get open. You don't like it? Get open. I just don't think Romeo Doubs is a very good wide receiver. He hasn't realized that yet. The Packers are starting to realize it, maybe. But he is probably not going to play, and I don't know what this is going to turn into as far as the situation. This is going to be a 1-week thing. Is he just having a little temper tantrum, kind of work things out next week, and he'll be back? I don't know. Whenever he is back, is he going to be relegated? Is it going to be a squeaky wheel gets the grease type of thing whenever he's back? I don't know. But I do know that Romeo Doubs, despite the fact that he runs the most routes, he gets the most snaps in that offense, he's probably the 4th, 5th best wide receiver on that roster. So this could be the beginning of the end that was inevitable for Romeo Doubs. I just didn't see it happening in this fashion. So that's wheels up this week for Dontavian Wicks. And then we're going to talk about another Packers wide receiver that we need to get in our lineups this week, a sneaky sleeper this week. We're going to talk about him in just a few minutes. Also for the Packers, Luke Musgrave, he's got an ankle injury. He didn't practice all week and is questionable. He's another guy who has lost his job, came into the season as the favorite to be the tight end 1 in Green Bay. It has clearly become Tucker Kraft. Anyway, moving on to the Texans. Joe Mixon has an ankle injury. This has kind of lingered for a few weeks. Remember, he suffered that ankle injury, came back into the game and kept playing. So that's what adrenaline does for you. That's what adrenaline does. But these high ankle sprains, man, it's not something that you can just come back from within a week or two. Even if you come back into the game because of adrenaline, they take weeks and weeks. And Joe Mixon is once again out for week 5. Now we get good news that Tank Dell, who had that rib injury last week, he sat out in week 4. He was up to a full practice on Friday. He is going to play. It was just a 1-week absence for Tank Dell. He is back. Dameon Pierce, hamstring injury, is questionable. He has been unable to take advantage of Joe Mixon's injury because it has also coincided with an injury of his own. He has missed several weeks with that hamstring. He was out on Wednesday and Thursday. He did practice in limited work on Friday. I don't expect we're going to see Dameon Pierce active this week, so it's going to be back to the Cam Akers, Dario Gumbawale show for the Texans in week 5. Look at the Colts. Jonathan Taylor, ankle injury. He has been ruled out. This is something that has kind of lingered for Jonathan Taylor over the last couple of years. He's had ankle injuries time and time again. Now, they reported it as a mild high ankle sprain, which really doesn't exist. That's not really a thing. You don't have a mild high ankle sprain. A high ankle sprain is a high ankle sprain. And we know that these high ankle sprains turn into long-term injuries for these players, especially running backs. They'll tell you it's mild, they'll be okay in a couple of weeks, but the pain tolerance is still an issue several weeks down the line. And then even when they do get back on the field, they're not their usual self still for a few more weeks after that. So this is a troubling development for me for Jonathan Taylor. That means Trey Sermon is going to get the start this week. Tyler Goodson's going to work in there a little bit as well. I think Trey Sermon could be an interesting sleeper this week. He'll get a decent workload, I believe. Anthony Richardson suffered a number of different injuries, I guess, last week on the first possession. I mean, it started as a hip pointer, and then it turned into something else, and now it's being reported as an oblique injury. He was limited in practice all week. He's officially listed as questionable. Now, one of the beat reporters, James Boyd for the Colts, he noted on Twitter yesterday that it looks like Joe Flacco took most, if not all, of the first team reps at Friday's practice, which tells me that the Colts are preparing Joe Flacco to start this game this week. But we don't have that word officially yet. And if Joe Flacco is starting, I feel a lot better about rolling out Michael Pittman and Josh Downs into my starting lineup this week, because Joe Flacco uplifts the pass catchers in a way that Anthony Richardson does not. So we're going to factor that in when setting our lineups this week. Moving on to the Jaguars, the tight end Evan Ingram, he was limited all week. He hasn't played since week 1. He hasn't played since injuring his hamstring, warming up pregame for week 2. He's questionable. Sounds like he's going to be a game time decision. So there is a chance that we get Evan Ingram back in week 5, but we got to monitor that heading into game day. Travis Etienne has a shoulder injury, as does Tank Bigsby. They were both limited in practice on Friday. However, they do not have an injury designation, which means they are going to play. Both running backs for the Jaguars are good to go. Looking at the Chiefs, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It was kind of rumored that maybe he might come back this week. He did return to limited practice. However, as of now, he is still on the NFI list with that personal issue. So I would lean towards probably not playing in week 5. Now, Kareem Hunt, who took the majority of the workload out of that backfield last week after Carson Steele fumbled. So we'll see. I mean, Carson Steele got a few touches early in the game. It looked like it was going to be kind of how we predicted this backfield to play out, but then he fumbled. And then from there, I believe he had just one more touch the rest of the game. So it was all Kareem Hunt and Samaje Perine after that fumble. We'll see if they work Carson Steele back into the mix a little bit in week 5 again, or if they're just done with him. Hey, you're the backup. We're going to roll the 2 veterans for now. Kind of just keep an eye on that, see how that plays out. But Kareem Hunt was limited with that shoulder injury on Thursday and Friday. However, he is expected to play. Moving on to the Raiders, Davante Adams is listed on the injury report with a hamstring injury. We could really just cross that out and just write hates Gardner Minshew instead. It would be a little bit more of an accurate report, but he is out for week 5, as is Zamir White, who has a groin injury. He is going to be out. The Rams, Cooper Kupp, he's out again with an ankle injury. Dolphins, Raheem Mostert, he has that chest injury. He's missed the last couple of weeks, but he returned to a full practice on Friday. He's expected to play tomorrow against the Patriots. Odell Beckham, who has not played yet this year, he practiced in full on Friday. He's officially questionable, and he looks like more and more, it looks like he is going to make his season debut and his Dolphins debut against the Patriots. Moving on to the Saints, getting close to the end of these injuries, and we'll get some questions before we move on to the next segment. Alvin Kamara, hip injury and ribs injury as well. Limited on Thursday and Friday. Sounds like he's going to be a game time decision. If I had to guess, I would say Alvin Kamara will likely play, but we have to monitor this one big time because it's going to be a close call. Going along with that, Kendre Miller, who has a hamstring injury, hasn't played all year. He was designated to return from IR this week. He was limited on Thursday However, he was full on Friday. There is a chance that Kendre Miller is on the field for Monday Night Football against the Chiefs. Now, with them playing on Monday Night Football, we have not gotten an official designation yet. We haven't gotten the official injury report for the Saints yet. That's going to come out today, so we need to monitor that situation today. We'll have a better idea by tonight on if we're going to see Kendre Miller making his season debut for the Saints against the Chiefs on Monday Night Football. Also for the Saints, Chris Olave, hamstring injury. He practiced in full on Friday and Thursday as well. He's expected to play. He's good to go. Taysom Hill, ribs injury, did not practice Thursday or Friday. He's trending towards not playing. Again, we'll see what the official injury report says today. And then Juwan Johnson's got a forearm injury. He practiced in full on Friday after being limited on Thursday. Looks like he is probably going to be good to go. Malik Neighbors, concussion. Even though it happened on Thursday Night Football, he had the extra 3 days. He has officially been ruled out. He's not going to play in Week 5. Devin Singletary, groin injury. He missed practice on Wednesday and Thursday. However, he did return to limited practice on Friday, but he is listed as doubtful. We're probably not going to see Devin Singletary. We're going to talk about that backfield a little bit more here in a few minutes. Wan'Dale Robinson, heel injury. He was limited all week, but he's expected to play. Aaron Rodgers was limited Wednesday with a knee injury, but he practiced in full the rest of the week. He's good to go. He's going to play. Steelers, Jalen Warren, knee injury, and Cordero Patterson with an ankle injury. They are both officially out. Russell Wilson still has that calf injury. He was limited all week. He is questionable. For the 49ers, George Kittle had the hamstring injury last week, played. Now he's got the ribs injury. Instead, he missed Wednesday and Thursday, was back to limited work on Friday. He's questionable. Sounds like that's going to be one of these game time decisions. We got to monitor that one tomorrow. For the Seahawks, Kenneth Walker, oblique injury. He practiced in full on Friday. He's going to play. No worries there. He played with that last week. He was fantastic. No worries for Kenneth Walker. Tyler Lockett's got a thigh injury. He practiced in full on Friday. He's going to play. DK Metcalf has a hand injury. He practiced in full on Friday. He's going to play. And Noah Fant, toe injury, was limited on Friday, but has no injury designation. And he, as well, is going to play. That Seahawks offense has been awesome. The passing game, the run game, everything's working. Geno Smith leads the NFL in completions right now. He's completing about 72% of his passes. That thing is rolling. It's amazing what a new forward-thinking offensive coordinator can do for an offense. It's unbelievable. And then the last thing we need to talk about for injuries is the Commanders. We got Noah Brown, groin injury. He is out. Austin Eckler, he cleared the concussion protocol this week. He's got full practice on Thursday and Friday. He is going to be back after missing Week 4. Now, his running mate, Brian Robinson, popped up with a knee injury this week. He's officially listed as questionable. He missed practice entirely on Wednesday and Thursday. He was up to limited work on Friday. He's very, very much up in the air. He's very much pushing to play. He wants to play. I would lean towards him playing, but we need to monitor Brian Robinson heading into this week for the Commanders. All right. Let's get a couple quick questions before we move on to the ones to watch segment. I've got a few sleepers we need to talk about for Week 5. Let's get this one here from Steven. I appreciate you very much for the $44.99. Very, very much appreciated. He says, I need to drop one in order to get Trey McBride back into my lineup. This is a half PPR scoring. We got Rico Dowdle, Kareem Hunt, Juwan Jennings, Tucker Kraft, or Jerome Ford. I don't like it. I don't want to drop any of these guys. But we got to make it happen. The guy I would drop is Juwan Jennings. We talked about it. I talked about him in my trades video last week. Coming off the big explosive game, we knew that once Deebo Samuel was back, once George Kittle was back, Juwan Jennings was going to go right back to the background, and that's exactly what happened. Now, he still had a usable game. He had, 3 catches for 67 yards, I believe it was, something like that. So it wasn't a complete nothing, but what Juwan Jennings is going to give you in terms of production with those other players healthy in that offense it's going to be so replaceable. You can find a million Jawan Jennings on the waiver wire in your league, especially because it sounds like your league is kind of a smaller league, so there's going to be plenty of options on the waiver wire. I'm dropping Jawan Jennings, even though that one hurts. Tucker Kraft, I'm starting him this week over guys like Mark Andrews. He's in my top 10 tight ends this week. Jerome Ford is still going to be the starter there in Cleveland for a few more weeks until Nick Chubb comes back, and then he's still going to be involved in that offense even with Chubb. Dowdle is really not happening, but he's still the starting running back for the Cowboys. He can get a touchdown anytime. And Kareem Hunt seems to be the number one running back in Kansas City, and we want the number one running back in Kansas City. So I'm dropping Jawan Jennings. I appreciate the question there. I want to get this one from D-Wave as well. J.K. Dobbins, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, for Stephon Diggs, David Montgomery, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. What do you think of this deal? I mean, it really comes down to what do you think? I think Travis Kelce is going to benefit pretty significantly from Rashee Rice being out. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes here as well. Tyreek Hill, it sounds like we're going to get Tua back probably week 8, which is great news. J.K. Dobbins is just a ticking time bomb. I think I want the Stephon Diggs side. I don't know. It really depends. If you need to win right now, that's the thing. If you're 2-2, 1-3, 0-4, I think you got to make the Stephon Diggs side work on this. If you can be patient and wait for Tyreek Hill to happen, we want the Tyreek Hill side. All right, let's move on to the ones to watch segment. I got a couple of quick, just sleepers that we need to consider week 5. Now we talked about. We're going to start in Green Bay. We talked about Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson are doubtful, very unlikely to play this week. So that opens up opportunities for, Dontavian Wicks and Jaden Reed. They're going to be full-time starters in that offense. However, we got to dig a little bit deeper. We're looking for sleepers here, real sleepers. Dontavian Wicks is not a sleeper. Everybody knows about Dontavian Wicks, right? Everybody knows about Dontavian Wicks. Everybody picked him up this week if he was on your waiver wire. I talked about trading for him this week if he's available. We got to go deeper. And that takes us to Bo Melton. Bo Melton needs to be added. Bo Melton, if you need a little bit of a flex play, got some bye weeks. Bye week started this week. Got a bunch of injuries. If you need a deep sleeper wide receiver, Bo Melton needs to be atop of that list. First of all, we have a great matchup, right? We have a great matchup. He's going to be the wide receiver 3. And actually, he probably is going to be starting in 2 wide receiver sets because they've been limiting Jaden Reed to the slot. They're only playing Jaden Reed in 3 wide receiver sets. So it could be Bo Melton and Dontavian Wicks in 2 wide receiver sets. Great matchup against the Rams. The Rams have been a complete dumpster fire on defense. We can take advantage of the Rams, especially in the run game, but also in the passing game. The defense is really struggling. Bo Melton is a guy with 4.34 speed. This is a big-time athletic wide receiver. He's a playmaker. He's explosive. Big-time speed from Bo Melton. This is a guy who was a 7th rounder from Rutgers back in 2022. And I got this stat from Adam Levitan on Twitter. So Bo Melton this year, it's a small sample, but he's run 91 routes so far this year. I'm sorry. That was the end of last year. He ran 91 routes last season. He had 18 catches for 244 yards, 2 touchdowns. Obviously, that's in a very, very limited role. But he was productive when given the opportunities. Now, he was targeted on 32% of his routes. Almost a third of the time when Bo Melton ran a route, they threw him the football. So all we need is Bo Melton just be on the field, and he's going to get targets. That 32% was second in the entire NFL in 2023. Obviously, it's a small sample, but it tells me that Bo Melton is commanding targets. He's commanding opportunities when he is on the field. He also had a crazy 2.68 yards per route run. Yards per route run is one of these stats that we can use to project future production. And Bo Melton was also at the top of the league in yards per route run in 2023. Now, according to John Paulson on Twitter, Melton is second this year, second on the team in yards per route with 2.8, which is even higher than what his yards per route were last year. Obviously, it's on a very small sample. He's only run 10 routes. He's been targeted 3 times. But again, he's being targeted a third of the time that he's running a route. And if we look back at 2023, the end of 2023, when Bo Melton really came on late in the year with Christian Watson out, Jaden Reed out in week 16, Bo Melton went out and had 6 targets. He caught 4 passes for 44 yards. He only did that on 38% of the snaps. And in week 17, with Christian Watson out, Jaden Reed was back, but Christian Watson was out. Bo Melton caught 6 passes on 9 targets for 105 yards and a touchdown. This is a guy who, when given the opportunity, can go out and give you a high-end productive week. He's a playmaker. This is a playmaker. And then in week 18, he followed that up with 7 targets, turned that into 5 catches for 62 yards, and he played 75% of the snaps. The Packers saw it. They saw what was happening, and they upped his snaps every single week from 38% to 66% to 75%. So I expect we're going to get a big dose of Bo Melton this week. Great matchup. If I need a deep sleeper off the waiver wire, if I need to fill in for some bye weeks, some injuries, got a lot of flex spots in my league, I'm picking up Bo Melton. I'm starting him. And I legitimately do have Bo Melton on a couple of dynasty teams, and I am starting him on a couple of those this week. One more deep sleeper we want to talk about. It's not quite as deep as Bo Melton, but he's a rookie. His name is Tyrone Tracy. He's a 4th-round pick out of Purdue. Got Devin Singletary. This is for the Giants. Devin Singletary likely out this week. Now, Eric Gray is going to be involved. Don't get me wrong. Eric Gray is going to be involved. However, so far this season, the Giants have clearly favored the rookie, Tyrone Tracy, over last year's rookie, Eric Gray. So Tyrone Tracy has accounted for 81% of the non-Devin Singletary snaps. And I'm getting this from Jake Tribby on Twitter. Tracy's been on the field 81% of the time that Singletary has not been. He's had 78% of the non-Singletary running backfield touches, both targets and carries. And he's outsnapped Eric Gray 6-1 inside the 10-yard line. So they're even using Tyrone Tracy down at the goal line. He is their clear RB2, which means he's going to be their clear RB1 with Devin Singletary out. Now, Tracy has outsnapped Eric Gray 63-15 this year. Again, clearly ahead of Eric Gray. Now, he's a converted wide receiver, so he's going to get plenty of targets in the passing game as well, especially we talked about the injury report. Malik Neighbors is going to be out, so there's going to be more opportunities. They're going to have to check the ball down more. They have to find more creative ways to move the ball in the passing game, which could really open things up for them to get creative with their converted wide receiver turned running back, Tyrone Tracy. Now, Tracy, he's got all the tools from a physical perspective. He's 5'11", he's 209 pounds, he runs a 4.48 40. He's fast, he's an explosive runner, he's got good vision, lateral agility, excellent change of direction ability as well. If I need to find a sleeper running back this week, I am looking towards Tyrone Tracy. All right, let's move on to the trends to know. Because again, I keep saying every week, this show is going to be 30 minutes, and we're already at 49 minutes. So we need to move on. We're almost done. Trends to know. I got a few trends you need to be aware of this week. We already talked about Ramondre Stevenson at the top of the show. One of our top stories. He's going to not get the start this week. They're going to start Antonio Gibson over Ramondre Stevenson. And that's kind of been the way things have trended a little bit over the last few weeks. He started the season with snap shares of 78% and 72% in weeks 1 and week 2. However, over the last 2 weeks, Ramondre Stevenson has played 46% of the snaps in week 3 and 55% of the snaps in week 4. So his snap share has dropped significantly. Part of that's the fumbles. Part of that is Antonio Gibson being healthy and showing that coaching staff the explosive plays that he can make, especially in the passing game. And then now, of course, we get that fumble issue. So definitely some concerns for Ramondre. We are, like I said at the beginning of the show, we're knocking him down the rankings. Not too significantly, but he's definitely got to take a hit down. We're also looking at Michael Wilson. We talked about Michael Wilson as one of my sleepers on this show last week. It didn't happen, right? It didn't happen as far as the box score. But if you look beyond the box score, Michael Wilson has had target shares over the last 2 weeks of 26.5% and 32%. These are very high-end numbers. There are top wide receivers in the NFL who don't hit these numbers on a week-to-week basis. So the opportunities are there for Michael Wilson. Now, of course, they're getting Trey McBride back this week, which is going to hurt his opportunity a little bit, but we have to continue to at least monitor Michael Wilson as a sleeper, deep sleeper wide receiver. At some point, it's going to all come together. He's going to give you some productive weeks. I'm also looking at Justice Hill, who has had a target share over 13% in 3 of his 4 games, and he's been above 20% in 2 of those. So we've talked about in the past how Lamar Jackson doesn't throw to running backs very often. Well, welcome to 2024, a world where Lamar Jackson is throwing to running backs quite often. Justice Hill is getting a bunch of targets in the offense. It's happening almost every single week. Even in a game last week where the Ravens were leading significantly for the whole game, they're still targeting Justice Hill. They're not in comeback mode, so this is not like a game script dependent thing. They're getting Justice Hill involved in the passing game in that offense, and he is thriving with those opportunities. So Justice Hill is another kind of like a flex play opportunity if you need some help with bye weeks and injuries. The last trend that I'm looking at is Travis Kelce. Is Travis Kelce on his way back up? I think he is. I do. A lot of the elements of the Chiefs offense that used to be reserved for Travis Kelce, this year they were shifted. A lot of those were shifted to Rashee Rice. Rice was getting a ton of those short and intermediate middle of the field looks. They used to be like a staple of Travis Kelce's game. And now with Rashee Rice out, those are likely going to go back to Travis Kelce. Unless they go out and trade for a guy like Deontay Johnson or Christian Kirk, which I think is definitely possible, but probably not likely. It's not likely, but it's possible. But as things are right now, things are trending back towards Travis Kelce. So I think we're going to start seeing his volume go back up. And if we look back at week 4, when Rashee Rice left early in the game with that knee injury, Travis Kelce was targeted on a season high 31% of Patrick Mahomes' passes. In his 7 catches on 9 targets for 89 yards, that's a much more familiar stat line. That's the Travis Kelce role that we are used to seeing. So I don't think he's necessarily the big-time explosive playmaker that he used to be. I don't think he's going to be the tight end 1 type of guy who's a must-start every single week. But this is a guy who is, I think he can give us top 5 tight end production the rest of the year. He's going to get the volume. And the way the tight end position is right now, that's all we can ask for. We just want guys who are getting volume. And Travis Kelce, I believe, is going to be back to being a volume getter. So we like that. So I just want to end this show by giving you an underdog play. So we talk about an underdog play or a couple underdog plays every week. This week we are looking at Josh Jacobs. I want to take Josh Jacobs higher than 14.5 rush attempts against the Rams. And here's why. So far this season, Josh Jacobs is averaging just under 18 carries per game, 17.8 carries per game. Now, of course, we look back at last week where he only had 9 carries, which is why Underdog has his line so low. But that's because they fell behind. They were behind 28-0 early in that game. So that forced them into comeback mode, right? So, of course, they're going to abandon the run. They're going to throw the ball, lean on Jordan Love and the receivers, go away from Josh Jacobs in the run game. That makes a lot of sense. But then this week they're going against the Rams. Now the Rams have an injury-plagued offense, which isn't going to allow them to take a big lead like the Vikings did last week, which means it's going to be more running opportunities for the Packers. And then their defense, remember, no more Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is gone. Their run defense is bad now. It's bad. They've allowed 661 rushing yards through 4 weeks. That is mind-blowing. That is awful. 661 rushing yards already the Rams have allowed. And obviously that's the most in the NFL. So I want Josh Jacobs higher than 14.5 rush attempts against the Rams. And when you sign up for Underdog, use promo code YARDSPER. They're going to give you a special pick'em, and they're also going to give you a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000. So use that. Sign up. Underdog. Download the Underdog app. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use promo code YARDSPER and take advantage of this line. All right. Well, that pretty much does it for this show. I will be back tomorrow at 12:20 Eastern time. I'm going to answer all of your start-sit questions. That's all we're going to do. None of this other stuff. We're just going to sit back, answer your questions for 40 minutes, all the way up to kickoff. And be sure, before I go on, be sure to check out the Coach Approach with Brett and Coach Bruce right here on the Yards Per Fantasy YouTube channel. That's going to start at 11:30 Eastern time. They're going to preview every single game as well as answering your start-sit questions. Otherwise, check out everything we're doing at yardsperfantasy.com. Find my rankings, our trade calculator, our start-sit tool, and more at yardsperfantasy.com. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. Special shout out to Stephen Drakes. Thank you so much. This was fun. This was Breaking Fantasy Football.